Given that some of your supporters have now quit your campaign, are you going to see the campaign through?
At the moment, yes.
Well, the loss to cover today. Kate Forbes has been treated in an appalling manner by many in the SNP, by many in the media, and it's apparent that just a lot of people in very influential positions basically hate her values, hate her Christian values. But I believe now that Kate Forbes would not be First Minister even if she wins the election to become leader of the SNP. And here's why.
That when it comes to our vote for who the next First Minister is, we'll be looking for a candidate who can stand up unequivocally for LGBTQ rights, not just for the rights that we already have, but for the rights that we want to advance, for the commitments made in the Butte House Agreement, for example, banning conversion therapy, a form of torture used against LGBTQ people. We want certainly to see a candidate who will defend gender recognition reform in court against the UK government's completely unacceptable veto.
You serve in government with someone who holds those views, and could the Butte House Agreement be sustained?
Some of the comments have been very shocking, let's be honest, but some of those comments have also received a significant pushback, including from SNP members. I think that's encouraging that in recognising that some of these things are, out with the realms of what's acceptable in terms of politics in the modern world. The Greens are very clear that we are committed to progressive values. We are confident that we'll have the opportunity to work with a Scottish Government and a First Minister who shares those progressive values.
And I would expect any candidate for First Minister to be able to say that they would have voted for equal marriage, even if they don't believe their own church should conduct same-sex marriages. They should believe that the state should treat everybody equally.
So if Kate were elected leader of the SNP, she then needs to be elected to be First Minister. To be elected as First Minister, that is a vote of MSPs. Now, at the moment, there are 64 SNP MSPs, there are 8 Greens, there are 57 from the Unionist opposition parties. Kate would need a majority in the vote to become First Minister. The Greens are basically saying they wouldn't vote for her. If the Greens voted against her, there is no way Kate Forbes can become First Minister. If the Greens just abstained, it would only take a handful of other SNP MSPs to abstain as well, and Kate would be unable to be appointed as First Minister. So I believe that even if Kate wins this election among the SNP membership, she would not be able to become First Minister. It's very unlikely she would be able to actually become First Minister. Okay, I'm now going to look at a clip with something that the interviewer and the media in general obviously seem to think is extremely controversial: the idea that you shouldn't have sex before marriage.
Is it right or is it right or is it wrong in your view?
In terms of my faith would say that children, it says sex is for marriage, and that's the approach that I would practice. But
so is it in your view wrong then for people to have children outside of marriage? That's your view, isn't it?
I mean, you're asking me, would I impose my views on other people? Ultimately, that's what you're asking.
No, I'm just asking what your view is. So, is that correct?
In terms of me personally, that is the approach I would practice.
Now, the media have reported that quite widely as Kate Forbes saying that it's wrong to have children outside marriage or wrong to have sex outside marriage. That's not what she said. To be honest, I'd be pretty certain that is actually what she believes, but she didn't say what she believed. She backed off from that. She was making out that it's just a personal view, just a personal philosophy. It's irrelevant to politics. Now, I think on this topic, the idea that you get married before you have kids, that's a really important message. That's something to make the world a better place. That's something to enhance family stability. That's something that would be hugely beneficial to children. That's something that would be very influential in tackling poverty in Scotland. But in the position Kate's in there, she didn't feel able to present any of that positive case. Instead, she's just sort of on the retreat, having to almost sort of disown her own values. Let's move on to something else. Now, I'm going to read to you from the SNP's definition of transphobia, referring to a trans woman as a biological man. So the SNP says referring to a trans woman as a biological man is transphobia.
Do you believe a trans woman is a woman?
I believe that a trans woman is a biological male who identifies as a woman.
Most of your colleagues do not take that view, and many of your colleagues would see that as deeply illiberal.
So as far as I can tell, Kate seems to have clearly broken the SNP's rules there, and what she said there is classed as transphobia. And there's now been a complaint from the LGBT group in the SNP have made a formal complaint to the SNP reporting Kate Forbes for transphobia, and I guess an investigation will begin. We'll have to see how that plays out in the years to come.
Have we become so illiberal that we cannot have these discussions, or some people are beyond the pale? Because if some people are beyond the pale, then those are dark and dangerous days for Scotland. And I think this campaign will draw that out.
I would quite agree with Kate. These are dark and dangerous days, but more specifically, this is showing that the SNP is a dark and dangerous party. It's the SNP that is putting a lot of this pressure on Kate and is responding with such hostility to her views. And I would agree, the SNP is a dark and dangerous party. So my question to Kate is, can you continue to support it? Can you continue to urge others to support it? You know, when an ambitious young Christian who wants to get involved in politics comes to you, can you say to them, yeah, join the SNP, follow the road I'm going, find yourself being treated the way I'm treated? Maybe some people might think, oh, join the Conservatives instead. Quick reminder of what William Hague said about the Conservatives yesterday. Kate Forbes' statement that she would have voted against same-sex marriage has obviously become a centrepiece of opposition to her campaign. So this is a quote. Kate said that she regrets enormously the pain or hurt that's been caused. I would seek forgiveness if that's how it came across. Now, I think, Kate, that the way you said things were not at all hurtful, and asking for forgiveness, thinking you might have said it wrong, that is not the case at all. I think Kate needs to realise that with these issues, it doesn't matter how you say it. If Kate had made that comment while she was giving a gay person a big hug, it would have made no difference at all. If you just say the wrong thing, you light the blue touch paper, and no amount of qualification can prevent the reaction, can prevent the explosion. Maybe it's more appropriate to say. It is not how you said it. It is just, as far as a lot of people are concerned, not acceptable to say it in any way at all. Right, conversion therapy. Kate's made a statement about that. A conversion therapy bill hasn't been introduced yet, as far as I know, but equally we should defend the rights of other minorities like people of faith as well when it comes to their freedom of expression, their freedom of speech and their freedom of practice. I think there's a way for the bill to respect that while at the same time ensuring that coercion has no place in Scotland. Right, well, anything coerced would already be illegal. Now again, Kate seems to think that she can square the circle, that she can find some middle ground that will be acceptable to the people campaigning for conversion therapy. In other words, basically every other MSP in the Scottish Parliament and every party in the Scottish Parliament. But I would say to Kate, you can't. You can't square that circle. The majority view within the SNP, within the Scottish Government, within the Scottish Parliament, is that conversion therapy is torture. Okay, I know it's totally idiotic, but that's what they think. You cannot find middle ground with these people. You may think that you're going to find a way to do it, but to be honest, I think ultimately you would find, as you find with these other issues, there is no way to find middle ground. They will reject your view and will attack you viciously for it. Right, assisted suicide. Kate made some comments. She said she was unconvinced by the bill, highlighting what she said was a lack of sufficient safeguards. I'm unconvinced. It's one that I followed with significant interest. In fact, I followed the previous bills with quite considerable interest. My position on the bill is that I've never seen a bill or indeed a law, whether in the Netherlands or Oregon, which has sufficient safeguards in it. Liam MacArthur may prove me wrong, but I've never seen a bill with sufficient safeguards that somebody would not feel pressure to take that route or couldn't be exploited. Now, again, I don't think that actually reflects what Kate actually believes. I believe it's more likely that Kate thinks that there can be no safeguards. So it's not that she's waiting to see if someone can come up with the right bill. I would think she believes there just cannot be safeguards. That's what I believe as well. I also think she would believe that the idea of people deliberately killing each other or helping people to kill themselves is just immoral. It's a fundamental moral principle to do with the sanctity of life. I think that's what Kate really believes, but I think she's trying to position herself in the middle ground there. And here's an attack on Kate in the Telegraph. Similar attacks in the Daily Express and the Daily Mail. Some people have suggested they think the reason why these papers are attacking Kate is because they fear her leading the independence course, because I think she might be more effective. But Kate really is getting it from all sides. Let's hear from her again.
Kate Forbes, a difficult first 24 hours in the campaign?
Well, I have been honest and open with the questions that I've been asked. Marriage.
So you're now relaxed about gay marriage?
Well, I'm happy to support it in terms of the legal position and to defend the right.
But I'm just trying to work out, where are you now? Are you now someone who backs gay marriage because
it's a legal right?
but not because you agree with it in principle?
In terms of how I practice my faith, well, here's the question. In a liberal and pluralistic society, can you distinguish between what someone might practice according to their conscience
But
and
no one's
what they might
asking you
support?
to practice it because you are married to a man, but do you approve of two men being married or two women being married?
I'm happy to uphold that legal right. I've used this example already, but I do think Angela Merkel is a good case in point, where
You mean a German conservative leader?
she, in terms of the principle, can you in a pluralistic society have somebody who upholds
But it sounds
the
like your
democratic
views
right?
and faith have changed on this, or your views have changed on this, and that 10 years ago you would have opposed it. Now you say you're happy to accept it.
Because I'm a servant of democracy. It's a democratic right.
But I'm not asking you about that. I'm asking you about your own personal views. Do you think that gay marriage is right or wrong?
Well, I have answered in terms of
But
my faith.
answer me that then. Is it right or wrong?
In terms of my faith position, I would practice that marriage is between a man and a woman.
So you think gay marriage is wrong then?
I don't think it's as simple as that. I think in terms of the legal position, it is a right that people have that I would defend. If you're asking me what my
So you
position is
accept it legally,
personally,
but you don't accept it morally?
morally, I would believe, according to my conscience, that the marriage that is defined within my faith is between a man and a woman, like it is in Islam, like it is in Judaism, and like it is in other faiths.
So legally you accept gay marriage, but morally you don't accept gay marriage?
And I would hope that that is possible in a pluralistic society.
Well, Kate started talking about straight answers. I'm not sure the answer that she was giving there was very straight at all. I mean, my answer to that with same-sex marriage, for example, my personal opinion on same-sex relationships, same-sex marriage, well, I believe homosexual relationships are immoral. When I decide something's immoral, there are three contributory reasons for that. That can be reason, revelation, and intuition. When we look at reason, if we look at the outcomes of same-sex relationships, they tend to be unstable and often don't enhance the well-being of the people in them. And I think for children as well, it creates a less than ideal situation. Intuition, my conscience says to me that that type of sexual relationship is not proper, is not moral. And revelation, as a Christian, I believe that God's revealed moral standards as well through the Bible, and I believe that also backs up the other two factors as well. Now, Kate's answer, the problem is that she gives no reasons for it, so it leaves people assuming that it's irrational. It's just, basically, my religion says so. I don't need any more reason than that. Now, I'm not suggesting that Kate, it would have been wise for her to try and put forward these other viewpoints, because in that situation, it wouldn't make sense. But I think that situation is one that it's not good to get into. But anyway, the interviewer pressed on with the Tim Farron question.
But is homosexuality wrong? Is that where you're from?
I am from a faith position which practices that marriage, as we've talked about, is for a man and a woman.
Beyond even marriage, is homosexuality wrong?
I think if you want a theological answer, because that's a theological question.
I'm asking you a political question, really. I mean, is
homosexuality
wrong?
In terms of gay people, straight people, I will defend their right to live and to love however they please. So in terms of that legal right, it is perfectly justified for them to live in a free and pluralistic society.
But morally, you would still consider it to be a sin?
Well, sin, if you're asking, that is a theological question. Sin, according to the Bible, if you want to cite that as evidence for faith, sin is how you treat God. So ultimately, it's about your view of God. You can be gay or straight, and it's about how you view God and love your neighbour. You can be watching TV
so your
on a night out.
Then, so is your interpretation that gay sex is a sin then?
My interpretation is that whether you're gay or straight, how you treat God and how you treat your neighbour is the definition of sin. And that can only be accounted for between an individual and God.
Well, you see, Kate Ford's basically refused to answer. I believe that she almost certainly believes what I've just explained. She believes that homosexual sex is immoral. Well, she believes any sex outside heterosexual sex is immoral. Now, if I was asked that, I would answer it, and I'd say, but politically, The only impact would be maybe in terms of education. Schools should not be teaching children that all types of sexual relationships are equally valid, because that's a controversial viewpoint, so it shouldn't be being presented to children as fact in school. Right, we'll now go on to the key issue of abortion.
Some are concerned about how that might eventuate in parliamentary terms, and they cite a quite often refer to a speech you gave, which regarding protecting the unborn as being true progress. Does that translate as you being against abortion, for example, then?
Well, the funny thing about that speech is that it wasn't a speech, it was a prayer at a prayer breakfast. So for anybody now to be monitoring people's prayers is just a remarkable development in Scottish public life. That something that used to be genuinely private, and that was a prayer breakfast, it wasn't a political event, for that to be now monitored as whether or not it is acceptable in the public's eyes, I think raises enormous questions about Scottish society and about illiberalism. In terms of my position on abortion, I personally could never conceive of having an abortion. I've just come back from maternity leave. I've seen my baby at 12 weeks. I've seen my baby at 20 weeks. I couldn't conceive of having an abortion. But I have zero intention or interest in changing the law that allows for other people to have an abortion. I don't think that any woman goes for an abortion lightly, and those legal provisions exist. And certainly under any leadership that I have, I wouldn't be changing the law.
Yeah, so Kate's taken what I call the Jacob Rees-Mogg line there. Jacob Rees-Mogg will talk quite passionately and directly about the evil of abortion, but then he'll say, well, don't worry, I'm not going to try and stop it. I'm not going to try and change the law. So Kate's talked about the need to protect the unborn, human life, but now she's saying here that she would allow the killing of the unborn to continue, as that she was not going to make any effort to stop that, to restrain it. So it's quite sad to hear Kate saying that. I believe that on reflection, she will regret that. I think in Kate's position, she needs to make compromises, sacrifices even, in order to seek the position that she is seeking. And Kate would probably argue that she wants to be First Minister in order to be a positive influence. And so you have to make these compromises and sacrifices along the way. When it comes to the life of the unborn, is it okay to compromise and to sacrifice on those? I would suggest not. Now, I really sympathise for Kate. She's getting it from all sides politically, and I'm criticising here as well. But I would emphasise, could I have done better in that situation? Well, no, certainly not. If I was aiming to be the leader of the SNP while simultaneously upholding vital moral principles, could I have done any better? No, because it's an impossible job. It is impossible to aim for SNP leadership while upholding vital moral principles of the type that Kate holds. But I believe Kate's mistake is to put herself in that position. I believe the mistake was optimism. It was the belief that Kate could join a party that's very hostile to her values, and she could win them over. She could form good relationships. She could network. She would really make such an effort to be so reasonable that they would accept it in the end. But I would suggest that that has been proved wrong. Basically, Kate joined the wrong party. Kate joined a party that hates her values, and the consequences of that are now being worked out. Now Kate's spoken at a few points about the SNP needs to be tolerant. What does liberalism mean within the SNP? To be honest, I don't really buy that line, because political parties embody a set of principles, a set of values, a set of policies. Now, with any political party, you have to look at those principles, those values, and decide if yours align with them, and then you join the party or not on that basis. If you join a party that directly contradicts some of your heartfelt values, then you're heading for trouble. You're heading for trouble. And I think when that happens, it's no good complaining, they're not tolerating me. Like if someone joins the SNP and says, I don't support Scottish independence, obviously they say, well, you can't be a candidate. You can't be leader of the SNP because your view does not coincide with the position of the party. And I think that's the position that Kate's finding herself in. You've got a feel for Kate, haven't you? She's been an MSP for 6 years. I don't know how long she was in the SNP before then. She's really invested in it. She's reached out in all directions. Basically, I think she was trying to build credit for this moment, to build the strongest possible network of relationships and warmth and support ready for this difficult time when it came. And the difficult time came, and basically most of those people have deserted her. And it must be heartbreaking for Kate. I mean, just look at this from the Daily Record. Love not Kate. If you don't get it, I assume almost all of you will, and there's like love not hate. In other words, Kate and hate, they're the same thing. That is absolutely sickening from the Daily Record. Absolutely sickening. Let's say Kate believed she could win the SNP over. She could win acceptance for her views by expressing them in a very careful way. I would say sometimes in a bit of a timid way, a bit of a diluted way. But no matter how she's expressed them, it still hasn't worked. She's still been rejected by a substantial portion of the SNP and the media because of her views. What's Kate going to do next? Is she going to stay in the SNP? I just think it's almost impossible to imagine. She surely must leave the SNP. And I think the lesson that maybe Kate's learned here needs to be learned more widely. Now, Kate's learned it the hard way, a very, very hard way, and it really upsets me to see it. But I hope other people can take this opportunity to learn the lesson the easy way. Don't join a party that hates your values.